How can the Detroit Lions win this football game? It's very simple. How do you see it playing out? And for me, Sam, the Chicago Bears coming off a bye week, very familiar with the Detroit Lions, of course. I mean, Eberflus, Fields is. We saw what happened at Ford Field. They looked good for 3 quarters. And then the Lions in the fourth quarter, especially late, and even before halftime, the Lions, their offense found ways, and they found a way to win the football game. Now, the Bears are going to be pissed off. Yeah. And they're at home. And I went and looked up the weather because I was curious. In Chicago, and this is just a general weather. I don't know if this changes, but as of right now, it's just 37 degrees Fahrenheit, and again, 66% humidity. It's not supposed to rain, but the wind's 12 miles per hour. So to me, this is a game that if you're going to win it, it's going to be on the shoulders of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in that offensive line. Now, Frank Ragnow's hurt. There is a concern there, but Graham Glasgow, what he's shown is he can slide in and play center right away and play pretty damn well. You got Colby Sorsdahl, which, could be the reason the Lions lose, according to Neil Rule. But I think Colby, with the experience he's kind of shown, he struggled. But I have hope for Colby this week. I do. Montez Sweat is a problem. Yeah. And, it's interesting because I watched Eberflus's press conference, and he talked about, Montez Sweat and kind of what he does for their defense. And he mentioned how, or actually a reporter mentioned how they're blitzing less, but they're getting more pressure. Which helps. Chicago Bears had one of the worst defensive lines to get Montez Sweat. Now they can do these things. This Chicago Bears team is playing better. They're coming off a pretty, I would say, I don't know about a big win, but a divisional win. It is what it is. The offense didn't look great. Sam Flannel, this game to me it can go down in a couple different ways, but this is the must-dos. Number one, for Jared Goff, it's very obvious. You can't turn the ball over. We do this every single week, especially with how the defense is playing. You just can't do it. They didn't do it against the Saints. They won the football game on the road. It's going to have to be a similar kind of outcome here. No turnovers. And that isn't just for Jared Goff. That goes for the rest of the Detroit Lions as well offensively, because there has been turnovers, and it hasn't all been because of Jared Goff this season. We know that. The other thing is the run game. The Chicago Bears have one of the best run defenses. They did when you faced them last time. And if you go down quickly, or you get down and you're already down a 10-point deficit early on in the game, it makes it hard, and the Lions have shown against the Packers that they can't run the football, which is something they want to do. So, again, they got to run the football this week. There's not going to be a bomb to J-Mo with 12-mile-per-hour winds. I don't think so. To me, this is an Amon-Ra St. Brown game, because the short intermediate game, this is where he's going to flourish. Sam Laporta, these type of guys. So they're going to run the football. They have to. And the other thing for this defense, and they did it last week again, and they've shown they could do it against Justin Fields, is the defense got to create turnovers. Sure. That's been the storyline. Last season when the Lions were 8-2, the defense didn't have a ton of talent, but guess what? They were creating turnovers. That was Kirby Joseph was. So that was the difference. Aiden Hutchinson was, by the way, last year, which is crazy to think about. Had a couple interceptions, especially down the stretch. That's the difference. You got to create turnovers. And if the Lions defense can do that, bend, don't break, they don't have to, hold the Bears to 3 points. We know what this defense is. We accept it. They got to create turnovers. And offensively, they got to control the line of scrimmage with the run game. If they can do that, because I'm not even going to get into containing Justin Fields, because, Sam, it's hard to do that. You could say it every single time you play the Bears, contain Justin Fields, contain Justin Fields. He's going to get 70, 90 yards on Sunday. It is what it is. But if they can create turnovers, that's how you're going to win this football game defensively. And then offensively, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, big game for those guys. Have to.
Yes, and I'm going to expound on a couple of things you said one by one, because I think they're very, very key. You talk about turnovers, and you talk about Jared Goff limiting his, or maybe playing mistake-free football, because the Bears, it wasn't just in the Lions game where they got a ton of interceptions. They got 3 against the Bears and then 4 against the Vikings and Josh Dobbs. So in the Bears' last 2 games, they have 7 combined interceptions, and they actually lost one of those games, which is crazy, by the way. You should definitely go 2-0 when you have 7 interceptions in 2 games, but still, the Bears have been turning the football, turning other teams over at a pretty high rate, at least in the last couple of games. But the good news is, when you last saw the Lions on the field, Jared Goff did play good, clean football, and that's all they really needed from him, especially given the fact that the Lions were the one that forced some turnovers. I think they were more unforced errors by the Saints, but still, when you can turn the football over, when you can give your team 2 short field touchdowns, you're probably going to win win, and that is exactly what the Lions did. And if they win the turnover battle, I have no doubt in my mind that they'll win this game because they already beat the Bears when they lost the turnover battle by a pretty significant margin. But also, you talk about the running game and the Lions. That's kind of how I would also say that's how they're going to win this game. They're going to control the clock. They're going to run the football. The Bears actually, though, believe it or not, they are tied with the 49ers for the best run defense in the NFL by the numbers, at least when it comes to rushing yards allowed per game. But this season, the Bears are allowing 79 rushing yards per game. That is very, very good. But in their last game against the Lions, they gave up 115 to the Lions on 5.2 yards per carry, including a rushing touchdown by both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. So the Bears were still able to run the football against this vaunted Bears rushing defense. I'm not saying it's bad or anything like that, but I do think they've merchanted a lot of good games off of bad rushing offenses, and the Lions certainly aren't one of them. So I don't think the Lions running the football will be a big... I think they'll be able to run it pretty effectively. But when you also look at something the Bears do well as well, which it kind of seems like old school football. They run the ball well and they stop the run well, and that also includes running the football well. And in that last matchup against the Lions, against their rushing offense and the Lions' still very good running defense, the Bears kind of got the better of them, but it was pretty much all off the back of Justin Fields, who had his only 100-yard rushing game of the season against the Lions. And it was definitely something that caused a lot of problems, particularly at the end of the game when it looked like they may have salted that one away. He ran for 104 yards on 5.8 yards per carry. So in that aspect, the Bears did win the battle in terms of their rushing offense versus the Lions' rushing defense. But as I always say, the Lions still got the win, and one of the reasons is because the Bears... they're a strange team. They do some things either really well or really poorly, and the Bears do have a bottom 10 pass defense when it comes to passing yards allowed per game. And even though they intercepted Goff 3 times, they also allowed that offense to go right up and down the field 2 times at the end of the game to take the lead and then ultimately win.
Right.
So I guess the main takeaway is kind of the same as you. Win the turnover battle, run the football, try to at least a little bit contain Justin Fields on the ground, and certainly another thing, do not let Justin Fields beat you with his arm as well. That's an obvious one.
And Sam, that is key, not letting him beat you with his arm, because Detroit Steve, when Fields rushes for over 100 yards, he's 0-5. And I believe I saw that stat as well, Steve, and that's a great point. Thank you for reminding me for that, because, again, if they're going to beat you, it's going to be with Justin Fields' arm. This comment as well, talking about the Bears turning the football over, because Jalen Johnson, they've been doing a good job turning the football over, but here's the thing. Jordan says the Bears have scored 6 points off those 7 interceptions.
That's insane, by the way.
So think about if you just didn't turn the ball over and you made the Bears go down the field on you. You know, like, hey, if you're going to get a touchdown, you have to earn it. And you're giving these guys short fields, and they still can't score. So, again, you look at the game at Ford Field. Yeah, Jared Goff turned the football over. You know, the Lions turned the football over. Still couldn't beat the Lions. Offensively, they came in and they scored late. If you just don't turn the football over, like you said, they were able to run the football. They just couldn't because they were down.
Yeah.
Dave Montgomery, who had like 12 for 80 or something like that, 12 for 70 something. And then Jahmyr had like 8 for 40, whatever it was. They can do it. Even without Frank Ragnow, that is a concern of mine. That's probably one of the bigger question marks. But to me, it's up to Taylor Decker, because you're going to have Decker and Panay on a Montez Sweat, depending on where they move him. I believe Montez typically stays on one side of the defensive line. So Taylor Decker, how he played against Rashawn Gary, cannot happen.
No.
You can't let Montez Sweat wreck this game, man. If there's going to be somebody, it's him.
Yeah, because Montez Sweat, if you let him wreck the game, he will oblige and do so, especially since the Bears, I mean, I'm not saying that the Bears really feel like they have any hope on this season, but they probably feel like they let one slip away, and they probably feel like if we can get this one against the Lions, maybe at the very worst we could spoil some more seasons. We could maybe even sneak into the graphic if they can go on a little bit of a hot streak. I don't necessarily think it's going to happen, but we shall certainly see. And another thing I keep seeing in the chat is about Frank Ragnow and how that could affect the Lions' run game, and that is absolutely true. But even without Frank Ragnow, I believe talent-wise and production-wise, even though it's been behind this offensive line, they do have the best backfield in the NFL, and they're both healthy, and they're both playing well every single game. So I don't expect the Bears to stop the Lions' rush offense. It may not average 5.2 yards per carry like the last time they played each other, but it's going to be effective. I have no doubt about that. And I want to respond to one more thing about the points off of turnovers. Yes. In the last 2 games in which the Bears have intercepted 7 passes, they've only gotten 6 points off of that. But the Bears also got 7 points off of a Craig Reynolds fumble on a kickoff return. So that still hurt them in some aspect. And I will say this too: if you're Craig Reynolds, just take a knee and take the touchback from now on, please. Is there any use to really returning kicks anymore? Like, I'm not trying to be that funny person, but for real.
Unless you're...
What did that do?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not just Jared. He's turned the football over, but it's all for just all players, special teams included.
Yes.
Is this... I want your opinion on this. Is this off base to say that I think the loss... Because, again, the loss of Malik McNeil right now and the loss of Frank, they're both significant. I'm more concerned about the loss of Aleem McNeil. Is that fair? Because of the drop-off after Aleem McNeil. Like, Frank is, and I argue, remember we had this argument, I believe Frank was the second best center in the NFL. You and Lucas went with Creed Humphrey. We had an argument. So I love Frank. But I just think without Frank, you still got a Graham, you still got a Jonah, you still got a Taylor Decker, you still got a Penei Sewell. But without Aleem McNeil, like, Josh Pascal is supposed to be playing more on the inside. So maybe a big game from him. But I'm more concerned about Aleem.
Well, I would agree with you on that. And for the record, you were right. Frank Ragnow's better than Creed Humphrey. I've already given you those flowers,
okay.
but yes, Frank Ragnow is better than
But
Creed Humphrey.
It sounds weird to say that because Frank's a better player, but you get where I'm coming from with that statement?
Well, but this year, has he even been a better player? We look at Frank Ragnow as a former All-Pro, a perennial Pro Bowler, and we look at Aleem McNeil as somebody who's kind of been a rotational
No, Frank's
piece.
been the better player.
Sure.
The drop-off I'm talking about.
Well, but like my point is that Aleem McNeil actually has been elite at times this year. And this defense, it is the weaker unit. And if Aleem McNeil is out, we're talking about things like, oh my God, I hope we get a legacy game from Levi Onwuzurike. You know what I mean? If we're talking about the Lions offensive line, you're still like, okay, they still have Penei, they still have Jonah Jackson, they still have Taylor Decker, and they still have Graham Glasgow. But when we're looking at Aleem McNeil, it's like this defense has already had some issues, especially getting pass rush. You take away the guy who's second on the team in sacks, and then you're like, please, Broderick Martin, please develop, please, Quinn and Bohanna, please, Benito Jones, and you're like, ooh, that is not a good position to be in.
Yeah, it's going to have to be productivity by a group effort. Like, you're going to need Bohanna, you're going to need Benito, you're going to need Josh Pascal. I don't think you'll see Broderick, but you're going to need guys to step up. It's as simple as that. A Bruce Irvin on the edge.
Yeah.
Can Bruce Irvin get another sack? Hey, speaking of sack a game, his Lions career this season, let's see a sack a game from Bruce Irvin, potentially. Let's see. He's supposed to get more run this week. Brian Ruth says McNeil's a top-rated D lineman on our team and top of the league. So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just think the loss of Aleem is concerning. I'm curious who steps up, though. I am.